Sorry, you couldn't muster at least a 500 season when it came down to it, man. This has been pretty bad. Pete Carroll is automatically 3-14. Let me reread through some of this stuff because it looks like I think I was on mute for the most part, but I will read through this pretty quickly. So the playoffs 2026 is set. All games have been played. Everyone who is in, and if you're out, figure out your plans for the off season and how to improve your team through free agency and the draft. But for those in the dance, it's time to game plan for your opponent. You punch your ticket. Now let's talk about the big dance. Let's talk about the matchups with the teams that are in from the AFC. The Broncos have the number 1 seed, and from the NFC, the Seahawks have the number 1 seed, and both of those teams get a bye. They get some well-needed rest. They can get back some guys that maybe possibly wouldn't have played in that time frame and whatnot. So it all depends on, what I'm saying, who they need back. I know the Seahawks will possibly get their left tackle back because they did not have him in the game versus the Niners. So just, a couple things that they have to keep in mind. But now the AFC, we got the playoff pictures here. So it will be the Texans versus the Steelers. It'll be the Bills versus the Jags. It'll be the Patriots versus the Chargers. And then in the NFC, it's going to be the Panthers versus the Rams, the Eagles versus the Niners, and the Bears versus the Packers. Now, in the midst of all that, once again, we got to talk about the business of the NFL. If you guys have lost their jobs, let's talk about it. Once again, we're talking about Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll is out as the Raiders head coach. He went 3-14 in his first season, and he just hasn't been doing well. And that's the unfortunate part of this. You know what I mean? Well, does that mean Pete Carroll's done in the NFL in general? No, not at all. Pete Carroll's actually not too bad of a defensive coordinator. But the thing is he was doing a lot as a head coach. He won his Super Bowl with Seattle and whatnot. But other than that, Carroll just hasn't been in the coaching ranks. He even stepped down and went up into the office for Seattle for a period of time. So it just tells you, that he may just be done with head coaching type stuff. But consulting or taking a look at things, or anything like that, it's not outside of realm of possibility. But as far as head coaching goes for the Las Vegas Raiders, ain't no more Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll is donezo. So you can see that right then and there. He is gone. And then the next person up on the list that unfortunately has been fired would be Jonathan Gannon. Jonathan Gannon for the Arizona Cardinals is now out as the head coach. We saw exactly what happened. If you don't know who Jonathan Gannon is, that is him. That's what he looks like. He was the previous defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles before he wound up taking on the head coaching job for the Arizona Cardinals. He was 15-36 in his tenure. And then, this season was just bad. 3-14. It was horrible. Now, sometimes it sucks for coaches because you only have, small spans of time to be able to do what you can and to get things rolling in the right direction. But they gave Gannon 3 seasons. He didn't do much of anything. And honestly, I think 3 seasons is more than enough time, to be able to establish a winning culture and at least look like you're on an upward swing rather than just not being able to do anything at all. I know the Cardinals had a few injuries. I know Kyler Murray was missing this year. James Conner was out this year. There was a lot of things going on, but to be honest with you, Kyler Murray wasn't worth much of nothing as a quarterback anyway. And I think they're planning to move on from Kyler Murray. So I think they kind of tried to clean house a little bit. I believe they kept their GM, but we'll take a look at that in just a second. But 15-36 just ain't gonna cut it. Now had you flipped that record and that'd be 36-15, you probably would still have your job. But I digress, man. It's just been an unfortunate situation, man. Guy got fired, but it is what it is. There's not much you can do about that. So the next guy up on the list too is it's unfortunate that he lost his job, but hey, man, when you don't produce, you don't produce, and there's nothing anybody else can do about that. And that's what we're talking about. The man, Raheem Morris, man. He was 16-18, in 2 seasons with the Atlanta Falcons. And it didn't work out for him, man. They let him go. He wasn't really doing very well. And to wind up at 500 isn't bad, but it still isn't good. Like, you should have had this team possibly going to the playoffs or doing something. And, right now, just the Atlanta Falcons now in search for a new head coach. And they have to figure out that the worst thing for the Falcons is now you have to figure out what you're going to do for head coach. On top of that, now you must also figure out what you're doing in quarterback, because you got Kirk Cousins on the books. You still have Michael Penix there. So whoever comes in, depending on who they are and the type of person they are, they may have a quarterback competition between Penix and Kirk Cousins. And to be honest with you, I'm not going to lie to you. If I am the Atlanta Falcons and I want to open up some money, I find one of those quarterback needy teams and tell them, hey, talk to Kirk. Talk to him. Doors open. Figure it out. I'd rather roll forward with a younger, inexpensive Michael Penix, even though I think Penix is actually a little older for, a young rookie quarterback. Let me take a look. Let me see here. So, yeah, Penix is 25. So, is he younger? Yes. But technically speaking right now, Penix, this is his second year, if I'm not mistaken, in the league. So, technically, you usually want him to be around 22, 23. Maybe 24 max, but he's already at 25. But either way, he is younger than Kirk Cousins. Obviously, less tread on the tire, so to speak. So if it was me as a head coach for the Atlanta Falcons, and I know that I'm coming in and everything is brand new, I'm opening the door for Kirk Cousins to move on and go wherever the heck he wants to go. I am telling Kirk, look, the door is open. You find a team, you find a deal, we'll make it happen. Because if I can get some of his money off the books, for me to be able to build my team, for me to start actually being able to look in free agency and say, hey, guys, you can come here. I got the money. Because the first thing you're going to entice people in free agency with is the numbers. You know what I'm saying? Some people will stay with a bad team as long as the money is right. And this is evidence in so many different ways across the league. So many different ways across the league. And for the people that now look, what I will state as a sidebar is there are people out there, former players, current players, who will, defend people staying where they stay, even though the organization is horrible and they're losing. What I'm saying? We had a dude that came out and he defended Myles Garrett's decision to stay with the Cleveland Browns. This has been things that have happened throughout the history of the NFL. But what I'm saying is, I can't defend you staying with a team that's horrible and then coming out complaining about not winning. You stayed where you knew you wasn't going to win. You knew that there was not the opportunity to do these things correctly. And that your franchise that you are currently playing for basically said, we're just going to throw a boatload of money at you to be able to make you stay. Now, this isn't strictly I'm not talking about strictly just Myles Garrett. I'm talking about anybody who stayed. I always use the same example that I've used before. And it, oddly enough, is about the team I just talked about. But it makes total sense. Steven Jackson was with the Rams forever. He was getting paid. He got in before the CBA, before the new one, that is, where it limits your money. He was out there getting stupid paper, and the Rams paid him. But then the next time they had to pay him, they realized, we wore off all the tread off that tire. We are driving, and it is sparking on the road. I hear that little doop, 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 doop. That means that the tire is coming loose, and it's going to eventually just rip off and go down the street. If you've ever driven on the freeway and seen big ass lumps of tread of tire, that's exactly what they were thinking when Steven Jackson asked him to pay him again. So they didn't want to pay him. And the man went on national television and said, I got tired of losing, so I left. And you went to the Falcons and did nothing. Why? All the tread was worn off of your tires. They used and abused you for all those years, and you only stayed because you knew the money was there. You were never going to win. I think they went to the playoffs once in Steven Jackson's whole career. And I think when they went under 500. I believe that was it Bradford? That was their quarterback. And I think they went at 7-9, if I'm not mistaken, So you're sitting there and this happens. But at the end of the day, when it comes to the Falcons, just to go back to my point, I get Kirk Cousins off my books. I open up money for my franchise. Am I willing to eat a certain portion of his salary to be able to make the deal a little bit sweeter? Yeah. I'm going to eat a little bit of that. I know I'm going to have to. It is what it is. But I got a starter. I've got a running back. I've got a tight end. I've got a viable number one wide receiver in Drake London. Like, I've got pretty much the prerequisites to a good offense. I just got to build my defense. I just got to make sure my O-line is right because everything else seems to be in place. See, typically when you start a franchise, those are things that you're going to have to build out. You got to find your number one back. You got to find your number one receiver, your number one tight end, your number one quarterback, so on and so forth. You have all of that, technically speaking, already pretty much in place. You just got to find the right guy to put in the right system to make it go and make sure that you guys start winning football games and stop becoming the laughing stock of the NFL, or just always finishing last in the NFC South. So either way, Raheem Morris is back out there. He is a wonderful defensive coordinator. I'm pretty sure he'll probably find a job somewhere doing something, whether it be DB's coach, whether it be defensive coordinator, whatever the case may be. He's going to wind up on somebody's squad. His job is not done in the NFL. I doubt that highly. Now, the next guy, we all kind of anticipated this may or may not happen. We didn't know whether it would, but there was a lot of problems with this dude. His season was just marred with so much ignorance, and it's Kevin Stefanski. It is Kevin freaking Stefanski. That's the guy. And Kevin Stefanski currently, his record with the Cleveland Browns was 45-56. Now, here's the unfortunate thing. Browns fans have come to expect this. That's the sad part. So Browns fans have unfortunately gotten used to watching their head coaches fail them, year in and year out. You know what I mean? I think the last time they went to the playoffs, they had Baker as a quarterback. But you know what I mean? Baker been chilling in Tampa Bay, making the playoffs, doing what he need to do, so he ain't tripping. While Stefanski sat there this year and had one of the wildest coaching, wildest seasons for a head coach altogether. Because when you look at it, you go into it, there's a whole QB controversy. We don't know what Deshaun Watson's doing. We don't know if he's coming back. You've got Joe Flacco. Then you got Kenny Pickett. Then you've got Bailey Zappi. You got Shedeur Sanders. You got Dylan Gabriel. You got all this quarterback controversy going on all season long. You basically tried to give Shedeur the middle finger in every which way you could possibly do it, and then didn't have any choice but to go to him because everybody else that was in front of him either got hurt or just wasn't good enough. You traded Joe Flacco to the Bengals. You traded Kenny Pickett to the Raiders. You know what I'm saying? You wouldn't name Shedeur the second, the backup QB to Dylan Gabriel. There was just a whole bunch of extraness in Cleveland that didn't need to be there. Shout out to Myles Garrett for now getting the single season sack record. That man has, I believe now he has 23 or 24, one or two. But it got to be 23, I think, because 22 and a half was the record for a single season, previously held by Michael Strahan. So basically with the Cleveland Browns, man, and firing Kevin Stefanski, now that opens the door for a lot of confusion because technically right now when you look at the Browns, you have Shedeur Sanders, you have Dylan Gabriel, and technically speaking, I believe you still have Deshaun Watson. So now you go into this new season, 2026-2027 season, you got to figure out which one of those three dudes is going to be the guy. And currently right now, the guy is Shedeur. He did win his last two games. You know what I'm saying? He didn't necessarily look overly great. I'm not going to sit up here and make it seem like Shedeur was, the second coming of Joe Montana or something, but he did his best he could with the time that he did have. And he proved that he obviously was the better choice in Cleveland versus any of the other options they had at QB. We all saw that Flacco didn't do too well. We all saw that, Dylan Gabriel looked a little suspect. But when you take a look at it, just to give you context, and you go to Shedeur Sanders, we could just take a look at his numbers just on the season. Now, once again, like I said, I'm not sitting up here saying the dude just, went out there and lit it up and it was the greatest thing under the sun, but he didn't do too bad. Shedeur Sanders for the season, 1,400 yards, even, 7 TDs, 10 interception. QBR was not necessarily the best. You know what I mean? If you're just looking at it, that's just basically what it was. And hey, you did what you could, but here's the thing for the Browns, and this is what I'm talking about. There were some losses in there. There were tons of losses because if you look at the Browns, just look at this. You started out on a 2-game losing streak, then you won one, then you went on a 3-game losing streak, then you won one, you went on another 3-game losing streak, then you won one, then you went on a 4-game losing streak, and you won your final 2. So when you take a look at that, just being honest with you, you know what I'm saying? You got to see the forest through the trees. So that tells you that there was definitely growth. There are things that he can work on. There are things that he can get better at. But you're dealing with a player who will see and address those things on their own. You're not dealing with a player that won't do that won't take that moment and say, hey, I've got things to fix and to be better about. I'm going to do that. Because a lot of times what can happen is people will do that. They'll say that, but they won't do it. They won't go out in the offseason and put it into work to get better, to understand their weaknesses and make those weaknesses strengths, to put it to a point where I can bring in a new head coach and say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is the direction we're going. This guy fits the mold. No matter what I do, I can use him in any which way I want to in the scheme that I have. So that's what you got to think about. And for the Cleveland Browns as an organization, yeah, I mean, you got to think about it. Andrew Berry's still there. He's not going anywhere. But you got to be wondering, damn, like, what's the deal with this? You know what I mean? Where are we going from here? What are the next steps? Who's going to do what? When are we going to do it? And how are we going to do it? You know what I'm saying? And I mean, to be honest with you, as far as the Cleveland Browns go, I would say get a head coach in there who's offensive minded because you have your DC. There's nothing wrong with the defensive side of the ball for the Cleveland Browns. I would say probably draft a few DBs here and there, but for the most part, Cleveland Browns defense is pretty stout. They're pretty good, but it's the offense where that's been the problem. So I would honestly keep Shedeur, and I turn around and say, hey, man, look, I've got, this amount. Let me see here. Let me see what they got for this year. Because I know they got draft picks, man. I'm trying to see how many picks they have and what they've got, because this will make sense for them and what they'll do with it. So let's take a look really quick and see where the Browns kind of go from here based on everything. So right now, let's see. I think they have the number 6 pick. They couldn't move higher. Okay, so yeah. So right now, I'm trying to see where the heck is it, man? They ain't giving me what I want. Sorry about that. I had this stuff up, and I apologize, but I'm trying to see what their picks look like. So let's see. Okay, so they did drop to the number 6 pick overall. So that's basically it. They have the number 6 pick in the draft. As far as that goes. And to be honest with you, with the number 6 pick in the draft, if I'm the Cleveland Browns and I bring in a head coach and that head coach tells me that he feels that Shedeur is the future and that's the guy that we're rolling with, then my number 6 pick is definitely an offensive lineman. I am picking the best offensive lineman available at number 6 to protect my quarterback. I want him to have as much time back there as to be able to stand up, survey the field, go through his reads, and make the plays that he needs to make. You've got Harold Fannin, who's come on as a fantastic young tight end. I would say the other thing is you're probably going to have to draft yourself a receiver as well. You know what I'm saying? And that would definitely be something that they would need to keep in mind because they're going to need some receivers. I don't think Jerry Jeudy is great. I don't think he sucks either. So he's like kind of middle of the road. But it's a little bit different when it comes down to it as that situation occurs. When you look at everything that they have, it's frustrating because they don't have much of anything. So basically, I just found all of the Browns draft picks. So They only have a few. They do not have a lot as far as that goes. So the Browns, let's see here. All right, nope, I don't want that. So they have 9 picks in 2026. So they have all their picks in rounds 1 through 5. They own picks in rounds 1 through 5. One of the first round picks they got was from Jacksonville. Then they got 2 5th-round picks from Vegas and Cincinnati for Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco. They got another pick, a 6th-round pick from Chicago for a defensive end they traded, and a 7th-round pick from Seattle for an offensive lineman they traded. So if you got 9 picks in the draft, then that bodes well for you as an organization because you can really build with 9 different picks. You can even take a couple of those picks and move up to go get a guy that you really have faith in that you think is not going to be there, or that you get wind of that someone else is going to draft. So the Cleveland Browns have an opportunity here to make some moves and do some things, you know what I'm saying, in the offseason. I don't know when Deshaun Watson's money comes off the books. Let me actually take a look and see if I can find that for you guys, because that's basically it. Let's see, Deshaun Watson contract. Because that's basically what's going to be the key for the Cleveland Browns to be able to move on and have some financial freedom. It's going to be really, really hard for this much. So currently right now, it looks like, yeah, this is the last year of his deal. He counts against your cap basically $80 million. That's insane. So his base pay for the year would be $46 million. And it looks like they structured it like this purposely. So the whole contract's guaranteed no matter what. Like, you're going to have to give that man his money. But I would say if you're going to try to avoid it or do anything, you have next year to avoid it. I don't know what they're going to really do, but I mean, that's 26% of your cap. And that's on a quarterback who ain't even on the field doing anything for you. So I don't know if you can restructure a fully guaranteed contract or not. Not to say that you can't go out there and ask, but I would definitely do that, man. Like, this is bad because the contract from jump was bad in general. He never really played. He never gave you guys much of anything. And it looks like the way that it was structured was for it to just go up a little bit here and there and then balloon in this final year, which is what it's doing. Like I said, it's $80 million cap hit. You got $46 million in base salary, $8 million signing bonus. It looks like if they were going to restructure, you could knock down, I guess, $25 million on that. He doesn't get a workout bonus for this year. He's been missing those all the other years because he ain't been able to do it anyway. But those are just small bonuses, just a couple grand. He's wiping his ass with that from the amount of money he's actually making. But I would say, honestly, this would be the year to try to figure out what you're doing with Deshaun Watson. Where are you headed on that front? And that new head coach is going to have to figure that out and make the decision and say, hey, we're out on Deshaun. He's gone. Cut him, do whatever, restructure, find a way, however you want to take a look at it, because you can't have Shedeur and Deshaun there and then Deshaun sitting on the bench and he's getting paid $46 million damn dollars. I'm sorry, but that's basically what we're looking at here. You know what I'm saying? It's a 5-year, $230 million contract. And you started in 2022. So, I mean, you can void it in 2027, try to get out of there without having to worry about it and, let him go out into the world, do whatever he's doing. But this money, unfortunately, is lost. And it's a lot of money to get off of your books. $80 million and 26% of your cap. It's pretty horrendous for anybody. I don't care who you are. So figure out what you're going to do with Deshaun Watson. Figure out what you're going to do with the cap. And for that new head coach that comes into Cleveland, honestly, I would say build around Shedeur Sanders. Build around him as best you can. You're not going to have a ton of money to go out there and take a look at it in free agency. And there may or may not be guys out there in free agency where you could do certain things with them. But you want to make sure at a bare minimum, you're finding a way to make your team better. Please do so, because you got some good things going on over there, and that's the case. But for everybody else, a couple of guys that just left, just parting ways. General manager Chris Greer for the Miami Dolphins, he's gone. I have not seen Mike McDaniel fired. So what that would tell me is that he is most likely going to stay in Miami. If the GM left, then he's still there. He's probably got, I think he's got another year. I think he had a 5-year deal, if I'm not mistaken. So I haven't seen Mike McDaniel fired, but we went through all these guys. The Rams fired their special teams coordinator, but that was a while back. That was on the 20th. And then, of course, on the 15th of December, Steve Wilkes was fired as the defensive coordinator for the New York Jets. Now the Giants have fired Brian Daboll and defensive coordinator Shane Bowen. So that's going to kind of suck for Jackson Dart, because now you've got a new regime coming in. You don't know what they're going to do. You don't know what their intentions are, and you're not their guy. And when I say that, the reason I state it like that is because when you're not their guy, it puts you at odds with the team. Because honestly, you've got Cam Scatterboo, you've got Jackson Dart, you've got Malik Neighbors. So you have a nice little trio right there for offense anyway. You have a good little trio in those three dudes. And if you could get yourself a tight end to go along with that, that'd be fantastic. You know what I'm saying? I mean, hell, if you're the Giants, if I'm the Giants, I'm calling it the 49ers. Hey, what you guys want for Tonjes? You ain't using them anyway. You only use them whenever George goes down. What are we talking about here? And you can see 49ers tight ends go different places and do different things, and they seem to be very, very good. Why? Because of the structure that the Niners bring. So if you think about it, head coach, hey, we're working with Dart. Don't try to get rid of him. Don't try to move him. That's our guy. We've got a core. We just need a dude that's going to be able to come in and make that core work and make it look better than what it has. You know what I mean? So these are some of the things to keep in mind as well. Of course, we already talked about Pete Carroll. We already knew Chip Kelly was fired, Tom McMahon, all these dudes. I mean, the Raiders had to clean house. They sucked it in every which way. Brian Callahan is gone. He was fired on October 13th. So now that means that, we got to figure out Cam Ward, number 1 pick. Now you got to figure out who your next head coach is. And see, what this happens is, and I'll liken it to this, and I'll come back to that and share it again with you. What happens with these types of situations is it's Alex Smith all over again. Alex Smith ran through coordinator after coordinator for 5 straight years before he got some. All of these things come into play. So those are some of the things that wind up not necessarily working out the best, and it gets a little frustrating. But hey, at the end of the day, you got to try to do what you can do. So the next thing here on the list is going to be, let me share the screen one more time, just for the guys that have been heading out the door. General Manager Monty Ossenfort, he's out as the Monty Ossenfort. He'll be back as the GM for the Arizona Cardinals. GM for the Giants, Joe Schoen. He'll be back for the next season for them. So everybody thought initially it was head coach and GM was going to be fired. Looks like it was just head coach. But for the Bengals, Zach Taylor is being retained, and Duke Tobin is the player personnel guy, so he's being retained. For the Indianapolis Colts, Shane Steichen is still going to be there. General Manager Chris Ballard will still be there. So they kind of saved themselves because they had a fantastic start to the season. Everything started falling off the rails toward the end of the season. Then with the injury to Anthony Richardson, along with the injury to Daniel Jones, who is their current starter, they had to go and pull Phillip Rivers off the couch and Everybody's talking about Phillip Rivers and what he could and couldn't do and everything like that and all that good stuff. So kind of is what it is. And then, you've got head coach / GM interviews. So another guy from the 49ers, Tariq Ahmad, he's been requested to be spoken to. He's VP of player personnel for the 49ers. And these are all dudes. So this is for the Miami Dolphins and their GM opening. So they want to talk to Tariq Ahmad. They want to talk to Alec Halaby. He's the assistant GM for the Eagles. John McKay, assistant GM for the Rams. John Eric Sullivan, Packers VP of player personnel, and Josh Williams, 49ers director of scouting and football ops. So that's two 49er people that they may want to bring in. And obviously, I'm pretty sure those dudes were spoken highly of by none other than Mike McDaniels. Especially if they're working with McDaniels and retaining him, they're saying, hey, we need to figure out who the next GM is because this guy is gone. And we need to know, we need some names, out of all those names on that list, completely tell you that I would probably look at John McKay, the Rams assistant GM, because they have built a stellar defense with that guy at the helm. So I would definitely, if he's the assistant, I would probably look at him and have him ranked number 1, and then have Halaby ranked number 2, and then, go elsewhere with the other guys. But the reason I state that is because the Eagles have a stout defense, and so do the Rams, and the Dolphins didn't have a stout defense this year. They were not necessarily the best. So definitely want to look at that. And then, of course, Tennessee Titans. They've got head coach interview requests. So they're talking to the Colts defensive coordinator. They're talking to Vance Joseph, the Broncos defensive coordinator, who has been a head coach in this league. They're talking to Matt Nagy, the offensive they're talking to Spags, the DC for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, here's the thing, okay? And I'll state this because that's pretty much the end of that list, and the rest of it goes on into other things. The craziness of this is you could have the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator poached from Kansas City in one offseason. Now, I have been on record stating I do not believe Patrick Mahomes is ready for the first regular season game. I don't care how hard he works. I don't care what he does. That is an ACL tear. You will not be the old Patrick Mahomes right off the rip. The Chiefs are not going to hit the ground running and doing all this other crap. And no, I doubt that highly. I really do. I think that the Chiefs will have a harder time than people think. I think the Chiefs fans right now are kind of a little delusional because they've had such a historic run, and now that it came to an end, they just think okay, well, this is just 1 year. We're all right. We're just going to hop back on the horse and we'll be fine. You're not going to hop right back on the horse when your lead horse tore his ACL, and he thinks he's just going to show up the next season and everything's going to be fine and I'm healed and I'm great. No, don't work like that, especially not for a quarterback as well. So we'll see what happens with that, but I doubt that Mahomes is ready. So when you take a look at it, if I take away your DC, I take away your offensive coordinator. Now you got to start all over. Now, mind you, Andy Reid can call the offense, so you still technically have an offense coordinator. No big deal. But you lose a DC. Now you got to bring in somebody new. And those players have to adapt to somebody new. They've got to adapt to that coaching style. They got to adapt to that scheme. They got to adapt to all of this stuff. And you don't know how they're going to adapt. You don't know how well received that new defensive coordinator is going to be. And these are all ifs, obviously. But, you know what I'm saying? It's something to talk about. Just taking a look at it. I'm not mad if they wind up losing out on that. I'd love to see the Chiefs just take a tumble and, sit out for, next 5 to 7 years. Just throwing it out there. But either way, that's the comings and goings of the NFL. I will be breaking down every playoff matchup. I'll probably do that day by day throughout the week just to talk about it because we won't have any Thursday night games, obviously, because it's the playoffs and they don't do that. You're not putting nobody on a short week, especially on the playoffs, because it's basically win or go home. But I will break down each game. We'll be talking about some things, looking into what what the dynamics of the game are, recent history and things of that nature, taking a look at coaches and, understanding what coach does, against the other one. All those things come into play. There's so much going on. But the playoffs are here, people. Expect me to ramp it up a little bit when it comes to the streaming and whatnot, like I said, just to be able to make sure that we got that. And, we'll keep things rolling. I appreciate any and everyone that's tuning in. If you, stumbled upon a channel because of a hashtag that I put, or, you're just coming across different shorts, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. I appreciate you. I'm on my way to 700. And then from 7, I'm going to 8 and so on and so forth, trying to get to that 1,000 mark and then continue to grow from there. I appreciate any and everybody that's watching. Stay up, stay faithful, stay blessed. Have yourselves a wonderful week, and go Niners.